second square is a 9 patch, although I'm going to change things around a little bit. I'm going to use the green here in the corners, and then on this strip right here, I'm going to put a cream leafy strip in the center. And so first thing I'm going to do is I cut all my strips 1 3/4 inches, and now I'm going to sew them together, and I will cut those separately. So this is pretty easy. All you're doing is strip piecing 1 3/4 strips. I can move the needle on my sewing machine, so I'm going to move my needle to where it is 1/4 inch underneath my presser foot. That way my feed dogs will be able to feed all that fabric through. It also means that if my seam allowance today is a little larger or a little smaller than what I did yesterday, then I can adjust it by using that needle. So I'm going to move my needle over to where I see the 1/4 inch, and that's where I'm going to start. So I've sewn my first strip together. Since this is the first strip of the day, I am going to go ahead and sew the second strip onto this strip pack. And then I'm going to measure just to make sure that I'm getting the correct measurement out of the gate. As you can see, it took a couple of tries with my 1/4 inch to get it to where I needed to get it down to. So when I measure now, I have my 4 inches, and that's exactly what I want. So on my outside, because this is my outside of my, my 9 patch, I am going to make my seams go to the outside. Outside out is how I remember it. And then I can just iron them open. So by starting with a scant 1/4 inch, I was able to go out to a wider 1/4 inch and not have to rip as much with my seam ripper. Now that I have everything measured correctly, I didn't have to go through that process with the second strip. And so for the inners, I can press my seams in. And then when I go to cut and put the 9 patch together, everything will line up. Now that I have my strip, I'm going to cut it into 1 3/4 strips again. I am going to start by trimming off this little edge right here, my salvage, and I am lining up vertically with one of the lines here on my ruler. Now I can turn it around. I have a nice clean edge. I have nice clean edges here. And I can do my 1 3/4. I'm going to need 2 of them for this block, but I can certainly cut as many as the piece will allow. Each time I'm lining up vertically and horizontally with my ruler. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my centerpiece. Trimming off a nice edge here. And then I got 4 pieces out of my other piece, so I am going to go ahead and start with 2 over here. Again, I am lining up vertically and horizontally. My ruler shifted, so I'm going to double check that this one is really 1 3/4. And we're good. I have 2 9 patch squares here, so I am going to chain piece them together. I'm going to start by doing the top and the center of one, And I am nesting up my little seams nice and tight together there so that I don't need to use pins. If I have more than one seam that I'm trying to nest together, then I always use a pin. I'm going to do the top and middle of this one. Nesting up these seams as I go along and lining up the edges of my fabric. Usually I have a whole bunch of them and I can just snip them at the end, but since I only have two, I'm using my scissors to snip those. Then I'm going to put the bottom piece on. Simple 9 patch. All right, so I'm going to press these open. And then the last thing to do is to square them up. And if you'll notice, the seams just want to go to the outside. I just let them and press them open. And by nesting those seams, you always get perfect corners. All right, so let's square this up. All right, now we're going to square this block up. I like using a small squaring ruler. This one is 5 inches. It's the Perfect 5 ruler. And so what I do is I line up, the Perfect 5 ruler has a 45-degree angle line going right through the center of it. And so I like to line that up with the corners of my block, making sure they're going through the center there. And that way everything is centered. And then this is where the turntable comes in really handy, is because then I don't need to move things around. And I like to square as I go, because if I don't, then I end up with this daunting task of having to square everything all at once. And so I square each block section as I go. So if I've done a whole bunch of 9 patches, then I'm going to square a whole bunch of 9 patches. And we have block number 1 ready to go.